Hi everybody, it's 9 o'clock and 9 o'clock is with me, Father Warner. We are in Friday of the 25th week in Ordinary Time and our text is taken from Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 to 11. Yesterday we did chapter 1 and we did verses 2 to 11. I've entitled today's teaching, A Season for Everything, A Reason for Everything. So let's read the text together. It's a familiar text and I know you'll smile as I read this text. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What gain have the workers from their toil? I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. The word of the Lord. Some of you who've been following the Queen's funeral in London last week would remember that in Edinburgh in Scotland, the first reading in the cathedral was exactly this text. I think it was read by the Prime Minister or the First Minister of Scotland. But coming to the text, the Book of Ecclesiastes represents a reaffirmation of that central idea held in ancient wisdom, namely that we as humans need to acknowledge the limits of our human understanding. We as humans must stand, therefore, in awe of God, in awe of His great, wonderful plan in our lives. That really is the moment of the beginning of wisdom for us, when we realize that God really is in charge of our lives. We are called, therefore, to live life under the Son of God rather than just life under the sun. That phrase, life under the sun, appears so many times in this book. Now, reading this book, one may come, as I said yesterday also, one may come to a rather false conclusion that the author denies the sovereignty of God. That is not true. What he does deny is the ability of us, finite human beings, to grasp the meaning of God. For the preacher, that's what Kohelet means, the preacher. For the preacher who is the writer or the person who presents this book, man's perspective is very limited. So limited that he cannot make any pronouncements on the meaning of things. It is impossible for man to formulate, in that sense, any theory with regard to individual occurrences of life. He may try to explain why certain things happen, but really it is beyond his ability to understand and to grasp. Now, humans have an innate tendency to search for a reason for everything that happens in life. Especially in death, we like to say, why did this happen? Or sometimes in tragic moments in our life, or moments that really shake us to our roots. We want to analyze it. Now, for the author of the book, life as we know it is repetitive. And the best way to approach the ambiguities of life is simply to accept it for what it is, not to overanalyze it, or on the other hand, not to avoid it. Now, the preacher began with the search for meaning in wisdom, in pleasure, and in possessions. In the end, the preacher discovered, or as he will tell us, we need to discover that we should enjoy the life that God has given us. Now, the text of today, therefore, can be broken up into two parts. The first part is from verses 1 to 8, and then we'll have verses 9 to 15. So 1 to 8, which could well be entitled a season for everything. And then you have verses 9 to 15, of which some part of our reading of today is included, and that could be well entitled as a reason for everything. Now, in today's text, the author of Ecclesiastes says that there is a time for every matter under heaven. When he speaks of time, he uses the word in the sense of an occurrence, or that simply everything occurs. Everything occurs. There is a time, an occurrence of birth, an occurrence of death, there's an occurrence of planting, there's an occurrence of plucking up. Everything occurs. So he describes the different seasons and the facets of life, which in that sense are beautiful, yet it also casts a dark shadow, because it reminds us of the inevitability of trouble and evil and of the restlessness, monotony of life, because as he presents it, so much of life just happens in a monotonous cycle. So the repetition of that word time, which if you look at the chapters 1 to 8, appears 29 times in these first 8 verses. The repetition of that word time is to indicate really this sense of boredom in the monotony of all things, rather than of their varieties. Actually trying to show you, well, life just goes on and the same thing happens and happens and happens. And he lists 28 different activities in these 8 verses. But whatever may be our skill, whatever may be our initiative, our real masters, he says, is not you and me. Our real masters is the season. They are in charge of our lives. The monsoon comes, the summer comes, the winter comes, and our lives really are guided, are pushed, are motivated by these seasons, and these seasons are monotonous. Now, there is a poetic quality of the list in all of this, but this poetic quality also shows that even the dark and tragic aspects of our life can be portrayed very artfully and powerfully presented, as he does. There are so many tragic things that he mentions, which he presents it so beautifully. Now, this list in a way also shows us the need to take therefore full advantage of the time that God has given us. God has all given each one of us time. A good person loses his soul. Saul lost his kingdom by not discerning the time. Esau, we know, came too late and lost his heritage. In the Bible, we hear of the foolish virgins who were also late. So let us take a few lines right now to also read these texts, because some of these verses could be misunderstanding to us due to the issues of translation. So I'm just going to take a few. Now, the preacher understood that though there are good things in life, the bad things in life also can't be escaped. So he says there's a time to be born, good thing in life, there's a time to die, bad thing in life for many of us. He speaks of a time to kill, and then he speaks of a time to heal in verse 3. Now that last one sounds very strange, a time to kill. So the author is not telling us that there is a time that we can go around and murder one another. That's not what he's saying. The Hebrew word here for to kill is not the same word that is reserved for murder in the 6th commandment. That word is quite different, where in that case premeditation seems to be of the view. Here, a time to kill is very often sometimes even linked to self-defense, like as in the case of war. And yet war brings upon us, in that sense, a reality and the horrors of death that we experience in times of war. We also have times of peace, which heals all broken things. So in that sense, he says there is a time to kill. Also in verse 5, if you look, we are told that there is a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together. This needs a bit of explanation. You see, in the ancient world, they commonly scattered stones on an enemy's land to prevent them from farming. So the author is simply acknowledging human nature, that we can hinder the good of others as we do, or we simply prevent it as we are also capable. We can throw stones, or we can prevent throwing stones and remove those stones and bring about a sense of peace. So having reflected on the season, we now look at the reason, verse 9 onwards. So we saw the seasons of the times, we look at the reason for the season in verses 9 to 11. So here's what I'd like to say. And here's what the author really is telling us in verses 9 to 11. He says, what gain do we have from all our toiling? That's the question he asks. What do we gain from all this hard work that we're doing? The preacher asked that kind of question. If you look at the book, he asked that kind of question even before. But this time, he finds an answer in the God-given task that God gives to man. So now he will acknowledge that it is God and not man who makes all things beautiful in his time. It's not we. Yes, we are toiling, we are working hard, but who makes it beautiful? It is God. We think we make it beautiful. It's not. It's a wisp. Remember, vanity of vanities, it's a wisp of smoke. We can toil and work very hard, and yet at the end of it, there comes pestilence and our entire crop is gone. But it is God who makes all things beautiful. He looks at the good and the bad as they are described in verses 1 to 8. And in that sense, the preacher understood that God has made everything beautiful, but he makes it beautiful in his time. And that's the real meaning of that hymn that we sing so often in our churches. Thank you everybody for joining me today, as you do every day. I do hope you like. I know sometimes the Old Testament is a rather tough book to understand. We've got one more text from Ecclesiastes to do tomorrow, and then the following week we do the book of Job. So it'll be nice if you read it. It's a very large book, but we'll cover the book of Job in just 5 teachings from Monday to Saturday. I'll see you tomorrow everybody at 9 o'clock. Don't forget to like and share this video, subscribe to our channel. We're close to, I think, 1,900 videos on this YouTube channel. That's how many videos I have out. You can always listen to all the many teachings that are on this channel. Bye everybody. Keep well.